they were fighting societies that are sort of like our own in the sense that they're constantly, developing new technologies, constantly, honing military science and building off of experience from the past, via books and learning, having huge organizational advantages over the tribal peoples. To compensate for this, the tribal peoples use their native ability. This alliance with the horse was really one half of what made these steppe people so formidable on the battlefield. The other half of the equation that was necessary to turn this into the weapon system that's one of the most famous in all world history was the bow. These Eurasian steppe nomads are horse archers, most famously anyway. All the tribes you can name from world history, from the Eurasian steppes, base their whole military on riders wielding bows. People who are so good at it that you must think of an army composed of nothing but trick riders from some circus somewhere. Those are the only kind of people who come close to your average steppe horse archer's abilities on horseback. And not just trick riders. You have to imagine trick riders who are also expert archery marksmen at the same time. I mean, the steppe nomad was able to famously shoot birds out of the sky in flight. Think about how hard that is for a moment. As a matter of fact, we're told that the Mongols specifically, although I would imagine other tribal peoples of the steppe also had this same situation happening, we're told that the Mongols were trained not to let their arrow fly until that precise moment in the horse's galloping motion when all four of the hoofs were simultaneously off the ground, thereby to not have your aim jostled, I guess. And the relationship between Mongol and horse, again, I would assume this is a typical steppe thing, reminds an observer from a settled society more like the close relationship between, say, a shepherd dog and the sheep herder. These horses were told, historian Richard Gabriel says they would come at a whistle, which is something right out of a Lone Ranger movie when you think about it. But he also says that they would follow their owner around like a dog. This is really handy if you're a Mongol trooper traveling with tons of extra remounts, which is what they did, 3, 5, 7, 20 sometimes extra horses with each trooper. If you have to actually herd those horses and keep track of them, it's really hard to move the army. If they follow you naturally, how helpful is that? It should also be pointed out that the women in the Mongol society, again, like women in other steppe society, were far from helpless when the menfolk were away. In fact, the steppe is the original, ground zero for where the legend of the Amazons comes from. And there were tribal societies of the steppe, for example, the Sarmatians, who had women who fought in their ranks, supposedly weren't allowed to get married until they had killed a foe in battle. There is some incentive for you. So the Mongol women, were told, could shoot almost as well as the men, if not as well as the men, and ride as well as the men. After all, they were in the saddle virtually just as often. And it was they who trained the toddlers of the Mongol tribe, both boys and girls, how to shoot and ride. So if you were an enemy of the Mongols and you stumbled on a Mongol encampment and the menfolk happened to be away, it wasn't as much of an advantage to just be facing the women as it might normally be. I should also point out that this Mongol bow was like a Bowflex machine, a weightlifting machine. It was a 160-pound pole. And the Mongols supposedly could shoot 12 of these arrows a minute and had 150 arrows in their quiver. We're told that at the openings of battles, they sometimes expended their whole ammunition load, relatively quickly. How many times could you pull a 160-pound bow back before your arms wouldn't do it anymore? You have to imagine these people as, in a muscular sense, ripped from their, the strength of their hands, all up their arms, into their neck and shoulder muscles and their back. These are sinewy, strong people who shoot all the time. It's like using a weightlifting machine. In battle, they fought like a swarm of bees. They would give you nothing to really lash out at. If they were pursued in battle, they often just ran away, shooting the pursuers, as they did. They provided no solid object that pursuers could get their hands on, and they couldn't catch them because usually, of course, these horse archers had a lead on them, so you would just tire yourself out.